Welcome to another Thursday morning in the Hub. And I am so incredibly excited this week because we're joined by Silvina Mascitti. And we tried to do this talk a couple of months ago, but then Silvina got a new job. And since then, things have just kind of exploded. And she's been so incredibly busy with all of her projects and all of her materials writing. So today, Silvina is going to chat to us a little about creating materials, specifically with a focus on British business English materials, but obviously a lot of what she's going to be saying will be relevant for everything. So without further ado, thank you so much, Silvina, for coming along this morning, and I'll hand over to you.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. It's great to be here. Thank you, Teresa, for this opportunity. And I hope you can get some takeaways today to use in your classes, in your materials, and to share with your colleagues wherever you work. So I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to start presenting. So today's session is called Behind the Scenes of Business English Materials. I'm going to share some tips from my experience. I know it's not universal truth. It's something I do. It's something I've been doing for 1 year so far. When I get feedback from teachers, I start improving my materials, and there is the idea today. So in today's session, we will debunk some myths about business English material writing, reflect on key elements in business English materials, brainstorm starting points for a lesson plan, at least the ones that I usually use, explore how to structure a lesson plan, that is from my point of view, of course, focus on general guidelines I take into account when writing my materials. We will analyze one of my lesson plans, one of the latest ones that I wrote, and finally share useful resources and further ideas for you to continue developing your wonderful materials. So first question for you, what are some of the challenges you face when making business English materials? Any word, any idea?
I have to admit, I haven't taught a lot of business English, but certainly one of the things that I had problem with in the past was knowing how specific to make it. Like, you know, if I was working with students who were in banking, and did they only want to learn about the world of banking,
right,
or was it more general?
Right. That is one thing that we don't know how the scope of the topics. Right, yeah. Right. That's one thing.
Julie said the same in the chat, relevancy.
Right, how relevant they are for the students. Any other idea? And I continue.
Nothing coming in as yet, but there are a few people watching, so I'm sure they'll catch up with questions.
Okay, no problem, no problem. Well, I will tell you what from my experience happened to me. First of all, it's this imposter syndrome here that usually haunts us. People usually tell me, or some teachers, I'm not a materials writer. Well, actually, this is what we always say. If you're a teacher, you are a materials writer. I mean, you don't write a book, you don't write perhaps a whole lesson plan, but you usually complement your materials with something, at least a short activity, some extra questions. So you are making materials. That's the thing. So forget about this, I'm not a materials writer thing. That is not true. And you can develop the skill. That's good. Writing materials is time consuming, especially when we are talking about business English, when we are talking about English for specific purposes, that you need to do some research. But in this case, what happens to me sometimes is that when looking for materials already made on the internet, I spend more time than actually making them myself, you know? So if you balance the time, sometimes it's better to customize and to make tailor-made materials for your classes. So yeah, it will take you some time, but it will definitely pay off because students will be grateful because you are adapting everything you do to what they need, right? So then grammar is the starting point to create materials. We think about the present perfect, the conditionals, the passive voice. Okay, that is the only thing I have in mind when I make a material for my business English students. Well, you can make it more dynamic. If you want to use grammar, is one of these starting points, and that is okay, and that is necessary, but it's not the only one, and I will show you more. So many topics to choose from. This is what Elizabeth Mackey told me on LinkedIn when I asked, about these challenges. Yeah, of course, that is what you said before, Teresa. There is too much to choose from. Perhaps your students are the ones who will guide you to the answer to this question. When you conduct a needs analysis, for example, they are the ones who will tell you what they like, what they don't like, what they need, what they already know. And in terms of technical knowledge, I'm not a business English expert, neither am I, because when I used to work for in company for a language school in Madrid and Barcelona, I used to go to 4 or 5 different companies every day, and they were about building, and they worked in marketing, in pharmaceutical. So I don't know about all those things, of course not, but they are the source of knowledge here. They know the technical vocabulary, they know the jargon, they already know that. So we have to guide them to effective communication. That's what matters the most. They can bring some articles to the class, they can bring some videos they would like to explore, they can bring you the email they find difficult to write, and you are the one helping and guiding them and writing your materials based on that. So, and about creativity, well, it's not a matter of creativity, it's a matter of usefulness and meaningfulness. It's what they need. You don't need to make a wonderful, appealing, colorful worksheet. It's something that they need and they will be able to use and to communicate effectively. And finally, stepping out of my comfort zone. For example, the course book is risky and unsafe. This happens to all of us when we are first starting, especially with this ESP, that everything is new and we need to learn a lot. But with the passing of time, we get more, we gain confidence and we start adding components to the course book, right? Or deleting or okay, I won't use this. This is not useful for this group. It can be useful for the next one. So that is what we have to do, right? What we should do. Try to feel more confident and to learn by doing. That is what I do, right? It can be wrong. I can fail. My student can say, okay, what is this? This is not working. But you can try and repeat and change and adapt. That is about teaching, right? And making materials. So next question for you. What do you take into account when making business English materials?
Excellent. We've had a couple of comments related to the previous section. Harry, grammar for business makes me so mad. And then Julie says a focus on functional language. So I think probably that ties into this question.
Right.
What's the sort of the language that your students are going to use, and how and when and where?
Right, yes, functional language is key. And this is related to Jane Westcomb. She asked me this question: how do you make materials up to date? I mean, how do you keep them up to date? Because they expire very soon. Well, functional language, I think that it doesn't expire. If you make a presentation, if you make a worksheet on making presentations or describing trends and graphs, these kind of things, that vocabulary can be used or recycled with many classes. And then you can change some aspects according to the student's context, right? But for instance, I was counting the business English plans that I have on my website, and it's 22. It's not a lot because I have like 80 on the whole, but 2 of them are related to to the pandemic and the other one to the Great Resignation. So in that case, those can expire, you know, because those, I hope so, right? The pandemic one. Those topics are the post-pandemic etiquette. Okay, that is a topic that people are going back to the office right now. So we can still use it, but perhaps in a couple of months, that's gonna be an old out of date lesson plan, let's say. Hope so, right? But yes, so keeping up to date lesson plans, I think that it's about functional language, and then recycling and reusing. That's my answer, my short answer. So I came across an interesting article by John Hughes that I will mention a lot because he's an important material writer, business English material writer. And he wrote an article on the material writing IATIFL group of interest on how to write business English materials. It was an an article on a webinar he gave. And he mentioned things that I really liked to take into account when writing business English materials. We should represent our students' context, not only in terms of LEXIS, field-specific LEXIS, of course, teaching vocabulary, teaching specific structures, teaching functional language that they need for their everyday working life, but also personalizing role plays. And he doesn't use the word role play, he uses real plays. And I really liked it because it's more, it mirrors their everyday exchanges, language exchanges, instead of telling them, okay, you are the manager of a bank and you have to talk to a customer or to your team about this. And perhaps your students don't work for a bank. So the more realistic the real plays or the case studies they can bring to the class, the better. That is representation and personalization. And I linked it to the DEI concept, diversity, equity, and inclusion, because it's not only about activities that we provide our students, but it's about, for example, images that we use in our materials. It's about representing people, representing culture, and also representing workplaces. Because when you see a book, you see beautiful Silicon Valley offices, like minimalist, and people are in a spacious place. And sometimes our students are not in those places. So perhaps they feel that they are not close to even to the image you are providing them with. So that is also an aspect to take into account. John also mentions 21st century skills. I have another slide for this that I won't read it all, but for you just in case to have the information. And this is related to critical thinking. That is the hots and lots that I wrote there. High order thinking skills and low order thinking skills. So adding some components of 21st century transferable skills to our writing is a good idea as well to practice in class. And last but not least, intercultural approach. We know that English is a lingua franca. English is spoken by more than 80% of non-native speakers every day in different business or other settings. So providing students with a variety of accents in our lesson plans is a good idea to represent their reality in terms of language exchanges, not only American, Canadian, British, Australian English, but also Indian, any kind of English, German people speaking English, Latin people speaking English. So the more variety we provide, the better for our personalization. And of course, we need to engage our learners. So all this has to be taken into account, but also engagement. That is important.
Jordan's added a comment thinking about engagement. He said that he teaches engineers at 8 o'clock in the morning. And so, trying to get them, make it dynamic and fun to keep them engaged.
Of course.
And adding to what you were saying about personalization, Karen commented that she feels that sometimes students need to be stretched a lot. They know their topic, they can talk about their topic. So sometimes taking them out of their comfort zone and getting them to talk about other topics as well, not always focusing on their field.
Absolutely. I agree with her. Yes, Karen, you're right. Thank you. Well, 21st century skills, I won't read them, but they are here just in case we share the slides. I included them. But of course, critical thinking, communication, collaboration, creativity. And I would like to recommend Rona Snelling's webinar. She gave a wonderful webinar on developing global skills in adult learners. So if you watch it on YouTube, you can get a lot of ideas for your classes, because she includes like asking open-ended questions and many other things that you can add on in your planning, right? This is an interesting webinar. And of course, critical thinking. I included the Bloom's taxonomy verbs here. And whenever I read these verbs, I have ideas to make or to vary my tasks, because I always look for task variety in my materials, because I get bored. I don't know about students, but I get bored. I write true or false, I want to vary. So this kind of chart gives you a lot of ideas for different activities you can do, even not on written activities. You can even use it in oral activities as well. And also another book that I really like about critical thinking, it's not business English related, but it can also be applied to ESP, Critical Thinking in ELT. So I take some ideas from John Hughes and Paul Dumay book. Well, then we have to define our goals and objectives, what our material is going to be used for. Do we want to develop skills, reading, listening, speaking, writing? Do we want to teach a grammar point or a functional language? Do you want to teach pronunciation? Do you want to prepare students for your exams, TOEFL, TOEIC, BEC? I'm not familiar with that. But anyway, so once you have your goals, your clear goals in mind, you can start planning your material, of course. And I read an interesting article by Ethan Mansour. He wrote it in March recently, and it's on the Macmillan's blog on how to conduct a needs analysis. So all these goals can be, you can get them from a needs analysis that you can conduct at the beginning of the course, of the class, and so on. And he also includes some ideas for business English classes, like, for example, questionnaires or interviews that instead of doing them yourself, you can ask students, if it's a group you teach, to ask each other questions. And they are, apart from listening to what the language they produce and you take notes, you can get useful information about their strengths, their weaknesses, their needs, their likes and dislikes, and so on in terms of English and business English. So what about you? What are your starting points when making business English materials? Well, you have the goals, so you know what your students need. So you sit down and what is your starting point now? How do you start writing a material?
I think you're going to have some good tips now. Karen was saying before that she's covering for someone at the moment, so she sometimes has to take on a business English lesson at the last minute, and knowing what to do, where to start is tricky at times.
Absolutely.
And just whilst we're waiting for people to comment on their starting points, she also made an interesting point about if you're teaching groups within a company, it can be difficult to make sure that you're catering to all the different needs. So if you've got students from the finance department, from marketing,
right,
and then Stephanie added, but you can add team building into being a part of your lesson as well.
Yes, of course, that's good. But well, I think that functional language in general, like writing emails, there is a common thread in business that you can aim at in your classes, and then you adapt, if possible, to the different areas. Yes, that happened to me too, that I had different students from different areas in a company. That's the typical, I think, right?
So Harry says, he says he always asks what English they're going to need this week, and then of course, how can he make it sustainable?
Nice, very good, Harry. Good.
So he gives an example, kind of, this week, are they going to be working on presentations, or do they need video call skills? That kind of typical, are you there? Can you hear me?
Okay, yes, anything else?
No, and just Julie says an engaging starting task, a video, an image, and then get them to activate the vocab they're going to use.
Perfect. Yeah, that is exactly my point here. So my starting points, that is the normal thing, I think. Well, first of all, LinkedIn. LinkedIn is one of my starting points for my materials, because I follow many business pages, like the Business Insider, The Economist, and so on. So every time a topic that I find interesting, or my students might find interesting, pops up, I write it down, and I keep it there, and then perhaps I go and look for a video for that. Or perhaps a video pops up and I say, this is good for my students or for my website, because sometimes I don't have students to try it with. An image can be a good starting point, an article, of course. If you have a book, if you're using a book and you have a great listening, a good audio, and the material falls short in exploiting it, you can go further and you can perhaps design some bottom-up skills listening task. I'm really now into decoding skills. I'm trying to learn more about that. So perhaps taking, because audio courses, audios from course books have very good quality. So you can take advantage of that. Perhaps they are not very authentic. Nowadays, I think they are more authentic. So you can use them to exploit them at its fullest, you know. If you use a book, okay, the starting point probably is the topic from the book. But from there, you can go look for other options. The needs analysis is another starting point, as we said before. Talking to your colleagues, talking to friends. Sometimes I talk to friends who are not teachers and they work in different companies. And they tell me, now I'm doing this in my company. And I say, oh, this rings a bell. This is good for me for a lesson plan. Or a blank page. Sometimes you don't have no idea, but you start with something, with nothing, and you end up with something really good. So this can happen. Well, the framework that I use, that is why I wrote my framework, doesn't mean that it works for everyone, or doesn't mean it's the only framework you can use, is the before, while, and after reading, watching, listening in my case. Then I add a focus on LEXIS or pronunciation, and finally a follow-up task. What I try to do from the very beginning is to lead students to the follow-up task, like a TBL approach, right? You are preparing students at the different stages to finish with a production stage. So they will gather some elements from their prior experience. They will gather some elements from the resource that I provide them with. And finally, they will end up producing something realistic, as realistic as possible. So the before watching stage or reading, I use a leading discussion to activate schemata, as one of our colleagues said in the chat. So we need to activate prior knowledge. We need to activate their experiences to connect students with the topic, to hook them. That's why I included the hook there, because this is the first stage we have to hook students into our lesson, the first opportunity. And I think it's one of the most important ones, right? And we need to engage them. So that's why I wrote engagement. They are highlighted. This is the very first part. So what I do in the before stage, I usually don't pre-teach too much vocabulary, especially at higher levels. I sometimes see some spoon feeding from the very beginning of the lesson. And sometimes we don't leave room for inference, because that is what we need to do when we give them a text or a video or a listening. Let them infer from the context, from their prior knowledge, from many other sources. So if we pre-teach them too much vocabulary, then, okay, what is there for the listening part, right? It's good to teach, especially at lower levels, to scaffold the activities, to pre-teach key elements, keywords, but not everything, yeah, because we need them to explore by themselves and to take some information by themselves. I try to avoid gap filling grammar exercises at the very beginning of the class, and at the end as well, and in the middle. Well, I try to avoid gut feeling, but it's necessary. I know it's necessary, but not at the beginning, because we don't want to bore them. We want to attract their attention. And if we tell them, okay, today we have the present perfect continuous and the present perfect simple, okay, they turn off the brain. That's it. But if you tell me about your recent meetings. Have you had a lot of meetings? Have you been very busy? What have you been up to? So you're doing exactly the same, but you are using the present perfect in their context. So grammar is always there. Grammar will be there forever, but not as a gap filling, like out of context thing, right? And then some prediction. You can start with the critical thinking skills using some prediction, okay, or tick the words that you will hear in the listening. So this is our topic today. What words will appear in the text? What do you think? So they can relate, they can make connections, and they can start to connect the topic to their prior knowledge. And yesterday I came across a very interesting post by Sylvia Clayton. She has a blog and she's also a material writer. Why should you use warmers? And she made really interesting points about this, about the grammar thing. And I said, I have to mention her. This is really interesting to read. And she also said that also warmers can be about something not related to the topic for the lesson, of course. That is also interesting. So for the while listening, watching, or reading, what I do is to go from the general, from the gist, to specific or detailed information in a text, in a video, in an audio. I try to scaffold the tasks. I've been trying to do this now, especially with lower levels, because sometimes they feel overwhelmed when you give them all together. Okay, answer these questions, fill in the gaps. So perhaps if you separate the video or the text into small bits of information, like watch 10 seconds, the first 10 seconds and decide whether it's true or false. Watch the other 20 seconds and tick the words you hear, or tick the anything, you know? So especially with longer videos, longer texts, lower levels. And also I tried it with an infographic. There is a material that I made with Let's Face Change. So the infographics are usually very long. So I wanted to make different activities for different parts of the infographic. And I think it worked really well because it's one of the most viewed lesson plans on the website. And I got really good feedback on this. But well, if you tried it and it was not successful or anything, you can let me know. Of course, I'm always open to feedback. And now, as I told you, I'm exploring the bottom-up skills that they are a bit neglected in our listening activities, because we want students to answer the questions, to write true or false, to do anything, but how do they get to do that if they don't understand what they are listening to? So I would like to add more of decoding, that is making meaning from all the bits and pieces of the language. So connected speech, word boundaries, these minimal pairs, like listen and choose the right circle, the word you hear, and you include minimal pairs there for them to, okay, did he say sheep or sheep, whatever, right? Something like this. And there you can work on the sounds. And for the after listening, watching, reading, I usually go or ask about their reaction to the text, to what they have just listened, to their feelings. Did you like it? What do you think? Do you agree? To what extent do you agree with what the speaker said? Would you implement this technique if it's something about business? Do you think it would work in your context? How realistic is it in your context? What would you do if you were in this manager's position, and so on? So relating to their own context. We discuss quotes from the text, and we analyze the purpose, the tone, the source, the bias, critical thinking skills. You can also give them 2 different articles on the same topic, and they can analyze the bias. I analyze the source, whether it's reliable, whether it's not, who they trust, and so on. Where they check information. And then for the focus on lexis or pronunciation, I usually follow a lexical approach. I choose contextualized, meaningful chunks from the text, sometimes high frequency phrases or any kind of vocabulary, collocations, grammar, pronunciation, connected speech, and we analyze it from there. So first the meaning in that context, and then try to relate it again to their own context. I usually try to relate it because that is the way for them to connect what we are looking at or watching in the video or reading to their own context and how they can apply it there in real life when they communicate. And for as regards this LEXIS, I follow an inductive approach, guided discovery. I try students to work out meaning by themselves, like what does it mean in this context? They can also use a dictionary, of course. It depends on the level. You can always assist with grammar, but context is key always to learn a language. And of course, the recommended book is Teaching Lexically. And of course, listening to Harvey Waters' interview yesterday with Hugh Dillard that was amazing. It was fun and super dynamic. So that is another recommendation. And for the follow-up task, as I said before, I try that the lesson guides students to the follow-up task. It's usually the production stage. So I also take ideas from activities for TBL, task-based learning, by Anderson and McCutcheon. I'm sorry for the spelling, for the pronunciation. Tasks should be purposeful and engage students in real communication. So if you are describing trends and graphs, okay, at the end they should describe their own, if they can bring their own graph to the class. For example, I have a student who works in marketing and he makes dashboards on Excel. And when I saw that and I said, oh my God, what is this? It's a lot of numbers and figures. So he explained to me and he could tell me what it was. He had the vocabulary that I didn't have, you know, some technical words and jargon that I'm not familiar with. So I guided him to explain to me and to talk about what he was doing with the language, right? With the functional language he needed. And of course, the last task, the follow-up task, is a good opportunity to recycle the LEXIS from the lesson. Everything is connected. Sometimes I see, when I see some lesson plans, I see lack of sequence. I see that the stages are not connected. So what I try to do as much as possible is to connect always. Okay, now refer to exercise 1, and perhaps you have to scroll up and go up. But this is the way of relating the concepts and of taking something from the lesson. So it's a good opportunity to recycle the LEXIS, to take some words to use in a role play or real play, in a writing that you will give them. So try to include 3 words from this lesson that might be meaningful for you in your working life. And the input flooding thing. So the more we expose students to the new vocabulary, to the new grammar point, the better they will learn it, you know, and they will remember it. So flood not all the pages, but try to repeat what you want. And then another thing that we sometimes want to do, is to include everything a text or a video has in our lesson plan. Because you say, oh my God, this is good for connected speech, for weak forms, for phrasal verbs. And then we have to think that we have 1.5 hours in our class. And if we want to teach something today, we need to choose and to focus on 1 or 2 aspects, not on everything. Unless you want to use the same lesson plan 3 or 4 classes, if you have the time, if you can do it. And then you can choose and focus on the other things. But less is more. The cognitive load is important to take into account when we plan and when we write materials. Some general guidelines that I use, that I take into account when I make my materials. First of all, blank space. Try to leave some space for the mind to prevent visual fatigue. Students need to find it easy to navigate and to find the different sections and the different stages on our lesson plan. And also to make notes. If you are using a printed material, it's good for them to make notes. The images, as I said at the beginning, they should be contextualized. They should represent the context and the topic we are talking about, we are teaching that day. Consistency, using numbering, using 1, 2, 3, 4, ABC to get some organization in your worksheet. Use bold to highlight the rubrics, the instructions, to make a distinction between the exercise when it starts and the instruction there above. The font, using the same font, using a clear font. Sometimes I see that teachers use italics or cursiva, something like that. So it's not clear, especially for students with special needs in terms of dyslexia or some reading difficulties. So all this is related to that, to accessibility. The use of colors, the use of a white page, not a color page, a background, and spacing. It's important not to clutter the page. And then instructions or rubrics, as you may call them, they should be short, they should be clear. We should use simple language, not a higher level. If students are A1, A2, okay, choose the right option and complete with it. Try to be very short and sweet with that, because otherwise it's confusing. And if you teach a large group, they won't understand and they will keep asking. As for scaffolding, you can use a glossary with terms that students need to know for a reading or a video. You can include a language box. I usually include that, especially for lower levels. Now I will show you. For them to use connectors, to use some phrases to express opinion or to express likes and dislikes. So at least the sentence starters you can include for them to use and to vary instead of, I think that, okay, you can, from my opinion, from my perspective, and you provide them with different options. And you tell them not to repeat. Okay, if you said this, now you say the other one, okay? And you start varying. And also chunking, this idea of dividing information, dividing a text, trying to make it more manageable. And this is something I really like, and we usually apply. John Hughes mentioned this in the Oxford course, but it's by Lindsay Clanfield, about tasks balance, the heads up, heads down, and heads together approach. So whenever you make a lesson plan, try to analyze it afterwards, whether your students will be with the heads up a bit, the heads down writing, and the heads together role playing or collaborating in a task together discussing. So if you keep a balance of this, the lesson plan will be dynamic. If it's mostly gut feeling, answer the questions, complete this, heads down, it's not going to be that dynamic and that engaging, perhaps, depending on the student, of course. But for online classes, we mainly have heads up and heads together, more than heads down activities, right? That can be for assigned as homework. So this is what I started doing at the beginning. Last year, these are my first lesson plans, and this is everything that you shouldn't do, okay? I didn't change them. They are in my website, on my website, like this. But this is what I was telling you about the colors. That this is about the images, the purpose of the images. Look at this beautiful pencil holder here. I mean, this is for me. This is to please the teacher. I wanted to put something colorful, but this is distracting. I mean, the prefixes there. No, this is wrong, okay? So I wanted to leave them because this is my writing process. This is how I'm trying to improve, and I'm showing you that there is always room for improvement. And I used to use frames for my lesson plans, different colors, the background, the page was, in this case, the power of quiet leadership was not white. I didn't use numbering. I didn't use bold to separate the rubrics from the task. So whenever you write a teacher's note for a teacher to use, you should include numbers, because otherwise, how do you write the answers? How do you refer to that activity, right? I didn't include the before listening or the before stage here in this one, in the let's say the ball rolling. So many things to improve. And with the passing of time, I got to realize that it was not useful, okay, or it was not convenient for teachers or for me. So this is one of my latest lesson plans. Here, my starting point is a LinkedIn post by Chris Bate. He's a business English trainer. He's amazing, and he usually posts very interesting vocabulary on LinkedIn for you also to get inspired and to share with your students. So in this case, if you see the layout, you can see blank space. You can navigate easily. There is spacing between the activities. There is bold and numbering for the headlines and for the rubrics. And you have 1, 2, 3, A, B, C. So then when I go and write the teacher's notes, I can refer very specifically to each of the activities for the answers or the suggestions. The images serve a purpose here because they contextualize, and I am asking about students' experiences, the meetings they prefer, and they can see they are the visual support for them to use. This is aimed at, this lesson is aimed at A2 plus. The very first part is quite easy, but then I included a video, which is a bit more a higher level video. So yeah, it can be used even for higher levels. So first of all, I activate schemata, students' experiences, students' prior knowledge. I ask them to predict before giving them the text to match the different types of meetings. I am scaffolding here too, giving them some relative pronouns to describe meetings because it's for an A2. So I thought it was necessary to give them some scaffolding at the end as well, some different ways of expressing opinion. Then on the next page, you have the reading task. So they have to match this number 4, the 5 categories with the types of meetings they predicted before in number 2. Of course, I'm mentioning the owner of these texts here. They are not mine. This is important for copyright that Audrey Smith asked me on LinkedIn. Always quoting the source because this is not ours. So the videos, I usually add a link to the video and I add where I took it from, but I don't use the whole thing on my lesson plan. I'm not selling anything here, but even so, you have to quote and mention, of course, the owners of the materials. Then in number 5, we have critical thinking. We are comparing and contrasting our ideas, our definitions with the ones provided in the texts, more scaffolding, more useful phrases for students. And then we have the discussion stage, again, relating all this information to their context. And then they are, in order to add sequence to the lesson plan, I link this reading stage at the beginning with the listening that is coming next. Do you remember any funny situation during a meeting? Because the video is about a parody of a meeting. So I'm trying to connect the two things. For the before watching, again, prior knowledge. I'm giving them some keywords from the listening, from the video, for them to relate to their context and to their knowledge. And the while watching is very general questions on gist about the purpose of the meeting, and then opinion. Is the meeting successful? Why? Why not? Not only listening for the information per se, also their own perception of what they are listening. That is also critical thinking. Then listening for detail, they have to choose the right option, and the 2 options are in bold to distinguish them. And finally, the after watching, I'm asking students their opinion and their reaction on this hilarious meeting and putting themselves in this manager's shoes. What would they do differently? Yes, looking for some other options. And again, relating to their own context, always coming back to their reality. For the focus on LEXIS, I chose some contextualized chunks that I thought they would be interesting for students. So students should infer and work out the meaning. What does the phrasal verb mean in a business context? When was the last time you threw out in a meeting? Threw out, yeah, not threw up. Yesterday I said threw up when I was practicing and I said, no, that was not the question. So a schedule, I try to take some useful and typical vocabulary that students can use then in their contexts. And finally, the follow-up task. Here we have a real play. I should change the name now because I'm asking students to adapt the brainstorming meeting to their own contexts and to assign roles and to use some of the phrases from the listening, from the video in their production. And again, we are recycling vocabulary from the lesson. We are scaffolding because they don't remember what they just heard. So I'm providing them with those key phrases. They can use more than they know, of course. And of course, I am adding to close the lesson plan an image to contextualize the task. And that's it for my lesson plan. So then when it comes to teacher's note, if you're writing for somebody else, you can include the level. I usually use the Common European Framework of Reference. I include the topic, if it's business English, if it's meetings. So it's business English is the big topic, and then meetings, managing conflicts, anything. The skills that you will focus on in your lesson plan, the aims, I use commands to discuss, to learn, to recycle, to review, to raise awareness of a topic. Instructions. For the instructions, you can either use hedging or commands. Hedging are the use of modal verbs. If you want to be more polite with your colleagues, okay, you may want to try to get students in pairs, and perhaps you would, okay, using modal verbs, not to sound that, not rude, but a bit bossy. I sound bossy in my lesson plans because I, I use commands. So ask students or get students in pairs, get students in groups. It's not rude, but it's practical when you write a lot of lesson plans. So the answer key, of course, and suggestions. If you're teaching mixed ability classes, if you're teaching students from different departments, you should do this. You can, you give suggestions, right? In order to customize the lesson plan as much as possible to other teachers' needs. Some useful resources that I use. If you want to use real audios and you don't know, you can ask some colleagues to record some audios for you. That would be great. But also there is a Facebook group called TD Lab Staff Room, which is run by Sean Sweeney from Dublin TFL. And he encourages teachers to ask for any audio they need on topics. If you want to make a lesson plan on, I don't know, any kind of negotiation, you can tell, hey teachers, could you please record a situation or a very short situation negotiating between two people? And there you will get a wide variety of accents because the group is composed of teachers from all over the world. So that is rich in accents. That is ELF, English as a lingua franca per se. Harvard Business Review, The Economist, Business Insider, Forbes, the Wall Street Journal, YouTube channels like Inc. or Trip and Tyler, which is a fun people to follow. So all these are resources that I use when making my materials. Any recommendations from our teachers?
When you were talking earlier about where people, what people's starting points are, people mentioned TED Talks as well. And there was a brilliant comment from Bhavna, everything starts to become a starting point for materials writers.
Absolutely. It's like a, yeah, I'm getting worried about that actually, because everything can be a lesson plan. So I should calm down a bit.
Yeah. Yeah, but I mean, and then if you think, if you're the kind of person that enjoys watching, you know, series, I've never seen it, but Suits or, you know, something like that, something that's set, perhaps even a parody of a business environment and kind of what's wrong with this environment would be quite
totally
fun.
The Office is a perfect example of that. Yeah,
definitely.
That is amazing.
There was a question as well, actually, when we were looking through your lesson plan, which is incredible, by the way. Julie said, do you ever add extra tasks that students can do as homework?
Well, not in my lesson. Well, I ask, in my personal case, my students don't do homework, and they don't do the follow-up task either. I mean, it's basically a dogma approach that I use. I start with the lesson plan and then emergent language and everything. But when I'm working for other teachers, what I'm doing here is for other teachers, I usually add some extra activity, not activities, but ideas in the teacher's notes, or further resources or further reading, not tasks, or some ideas about tasks, but not tasks per se that I add, you know, but I could try that, but it's more time also. Yeah. Good. Okay. So then you read, Teresa, if there is something else to say. So as for continuous professional development that we are always learning, here I have a couple of suggestions. For example, ETpedia Business English by McLaury and Hughes. I don't have this book, but its grammar is business English focused. So I think that you can get a lot of ideas, because I do have the second one, ETpedia Material Writing. And it's amazing because even though it's not business English focused, it gives you ideas of different task types to use. So then you choose the topic and you can adapt it to ESP as well. How to write business English materials. Well, I don't have this one either, but ELT Teacher to Writer series is a must. So yeah, and then they have also on training, corporation training. There is another one on that I came across on LinkedIn the other day. So those titles are always worth having, especially when you are starting writing materials. Then, if you want to listen to material writers speaking and to expand your knowledge, Billy Jago's ELT CPT podcast series. You can listen to editors, to material writers, to how to make inclusive materials also. Peter Fulagar, Lotti, many people were interviewed there, Tyson, a lot of interesting people. So even for a business English context, you can apply everything to make materials more inclusive, of course. ELT planning, the blog by Peter Clements. I have to mention him all the time because he's really helpful and generous with the community. And he writes incredible business English materials for One Stop English and for Ellie now for ESL Library. So he's another example of how to write business English materials. If you want to study to write materials, you can try the Nile course on materials development. Also, it's not focused on ESP, but you get the big picture. Or the Writing Your Own ELT Materials by Oxford, but now it's not run online anymore. I think it's in person, but I think that John Hughes will find a way to make it online because I think he can do it. And finally, if you want to join some groups, you can join IAT for Business English special interest group or material writing special interest group. So there you network with other teachers from your field. You can exchange materials, ideas, and of course make collaborations that I'm going to mention that now. So if you want to share your materials, start with your community, with your colleagues, be open to feedback, try the lesson with different groups, with different contexts, and try to see how you can improve it. Share your lesson plans on social media, on LinkedIn, on FreeEd, which is a teacher's platform, a teacher's community. It's free. You can get ideas from other teachers and you can share yours. Facebook groups, your own blog, or start as a blog guest writer as well, adding and sharing your materials in other people's blogs. Finding a writing buddy. This is a great concept that I like. It was mentioned or coined by Kath Bilsborough on her blog, which is worth reading also. And from this post by Catherine, Bhavna started a group on Facebook called the Material Writing Collaborative, in which teachers can look for other teachers to start making materials together for their classes, according to their fields, to their what they teach, who they teach, and so on. So I suggest that you join there as well. The more, the merrier. And of course, there are other incredible people to follow on LinkedIn, some business English trainers and coaches. Of course, this list is very short, but you can follow these people because these people share interesting vocabulary. They make wonderful and attractive posts, and they can be starting points for your materials. Because Chris Bate, he gave me the idea for this business meetings lesson plan. And Jane is always giving feedback on my lesson plans and adding extra ideas on what she did with her students. Chris Wright as well. So many interesting people to follow and to connect with, to expand the net and to expand your knowledge on material writing. Well, the references, and I think this is more than enough for me. Thank you very much for listening. I hope you have some takeaways from this session, and you can apply some of these and give me some ideas also to keep improving my materials. That would be great.
I mean, that was just such an incredible session. And people have been commenting, thanks for all the ideas and the tips and the resources and the starting points. Yeah, so really, really wonderful. And Lottie said as well, like the honesty and the self-reflection when you showed us your original materials.
Oh, yes.
I think, you know, it's really good for us to reflect on where we started and how far we've come and how we've developed.
And
So that was
imagine
really great.
next year, when I show you my lesson plans next year, I will tell you, wow, this is amazing. This is way better. So yes, we are always looking to make new things and better things and learning from others. That is key. Our community is amazing. There is nothing new about this, but I want to emphasize that because we are not competing. We are not, I mean, we are helping each other. And this group is a reflection of that. Thank you very much, Teresa, because we are always learning from different fields, from different people, and that is amazing. That is really nice.
We're full of marigolds, as Bhavna calls them. I think
that is a great expression she uses. Yeah.
And I think you're right as well that we're not in competition and people are always willing to kind of give feedback and help each other and give ideas. And as you were saying as well, that Sean Sweeney's group and asking people to record things for you, you know, everyone just wants to help out. It's great.
Yes, of course.
Fantastic. Well, I don't think we've had any extra questions come in. Lots and lots of thank yous. Oh, I did have one question actually. When you prepare your materials, do you do everything on Canva?
Yes, I do everything on Canva. As I said many times, I'm not very good at technology. Actually, this presentation is very basic and very. This is Canva as well. I don't like technology very much. I mean, that's why I don't try new tools and new things. I should perhaps, but I think that it serves the purpose. I think that for now it's enough. Then if I work for somebody else or something they ask me to do on Adobe or something more cutting edge technology, I will try and learn, of course. But yes, this is Canva. And the pictures that I use are from Canva as well. They have a big library and it's the basic plan. I'm not paying for that. So yeah.
Fabulous. Well, obviously Silvina's in the group. So if you have any more questions or if you're watching this on catch up, do leave us a comment. You can tag myself or Silvina if you want us to respond to one of your questions. Thank you so much for everyone for watching this morning. The chat there's 90 comments, which is wonderful. So everybody's been chatting away and thank you, Silvina, as well for mentioning
my pleasure.
So many people, you know, so many ways of connecting other people. It was a fantastic session.
Then perhaps we can share the slides because I spoke very fast and there is too much information and many recommended books and sort of resources. So perhaps we can share the slides somewhere, Teresa. No problem.
Perfect. Yep. If you want, I can put them on the blog because I don't know if you can add them as a comment. I don't know if you can add files as a comment.
Oh, right. You're right. Well, anyway, they are there. If it's recorded and it's gonna be in the group, then they can pause and take notes as well. Old-fashioned thing.
Love it. Okay, well, thank you again so much, Silvina. It's been wonderful to have you here. And everyone, I hope you have a fabulous Thursday.
Have a great day, everyone. Thank you. Bye-bye.